He built an empire from the ground up. But what happens when a man with everything sees a piece of his past staring back at him? Daniel Whitmore is a name people recognize. Sharp suits, big speeches, and a reputation as Portland's most private CEO. But on one quiet morning, as he strolls past a street market, his world cracks open. A young boy stands on the corner selling apples with a handmade sign. Nothing unusual, until Daniel spots something strange pinned to the boy's chest. An old ID badge. His ID badge. One he lost 10 years ago in a warehouse explosion that nearly ended his life. How did this boy get it? And why does he look so familiar? As Daniel digs deeper, the answers begin to shake him. Twin boys. A mother he never stopped thinking about. And a story of survival, love, and sacrifice that was hidden in plain sight. Now, he must face a truth he never saw coming, and make a choice he's not sure he's ready for. Will he walk away like before, or finally step into the role he was meant to play? Stay tuned to find out, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that will move your heart and stay with you long after the credits roll. The morning air in Portland carried a sharp chill, the kind that crept into your coat collar and made you walk a little faster. Daniel Whitmore didn't mind. He liked walking when no one expected him to. No bodyguards, no cameras, no investors whispering numbers into his ear. Just boots on pavement, coffee in hand, silence. He'd taken a detour that morning, away from the gleaming steel skyline of his logistics empire and toward the older part of town, where sidewalks cracked, awnings flapped in the wind, and street vendors set up with quiet hope. Daniel spotted him from half a block away. A boy, maybe 10 or 11, standing at the corner with a handmade sign and a basket of apples. His jeans were too short, his hoodie was faded, but his stance, firm, steady, spoke of something older than his age. Daniel was about to pass by when something caught his eye. The boy had a laminated badge clipped to his sweatshirt, scuffed, bent at the corner, but unmistakable. Daniel stopped. His heart thudded once, hard. He stepped closer, slowly. The badge was old, yellowed with time. It had a photo, grainy but familiar, a name printed in blue beneath it. Daniel Whitmore. It was his old employee ID, from a decade ago, from before the explosion, from a life he didn't talk about anymore. The boy looked up. "Want an apple, sir?" he asked, polite but cautious. "They're fresh. Picked 'em ourselves." Daniel blinked, words stuck in his throat. He pointed at the badge. "Where did you get that?" The boy glanced down, confused. "This? It's just something my mom found in an old box. Said it came from the warehouse cleanup. Thought it looked cool." Daniel swallowed. His voice was softer now. "Do you know who that is?" The boy peered at the photo again, then up at Daniel's face. For a second his eyes narrowed, almost like he was putting pieces together, but he shook his head. "Just some guy from a long time ago," he said. "You want an apple or not?" Before Daniel could answer, another boy jogged up. Same height, same dark eyes, same stubborn chin. A twin. "Evan," the second boy said, "we're almost out of change." "Okay," Evan replied, then turned back to Daniel. "Sorry, we don't really talk to strangers." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's smart." He took out his wallet and offered a 10. "I'll take 2. The boys looked at the bill, hesitated, then handed him 3 apples instead. "We don't have change," the second one said. "That's all right," Daniel replied, holding the apples with a strange reverence. "Keep the rest." He turned to leave, then paused. "What's your name?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Evan," the first boy said, "and that's Eli. We're brothers." Twins, Daniel thought again. His breath caught in his throat, but he said nothing, just offered a nod. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the apples." As he walked away, the badge burned in his memory. He hadn't seen that ID in over 10 years. Not since the fire ripped through the East Side warehouse. Not since he'd barely made it out alive. The media had covered it for weeks. 4 injured, 1 missing. And Daniel? He had disappeared from that part of town, vowing never to return. So how did that badge, lost in the wreckage, end up pinned to a boy selling apples on a street corner? And why did those twins look so achingly familiar? Daniel tossed the apples into his passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, hands trembling on the steering wheel. For the first time in years, a single question echoed louder than board meetings or profit margins. What if this wasn't a coincidence? Daniel couldn't stop thinking about it. The ID badge, the twins, the way the boy's eyes flickered with something that felt too familiar to be random. That night, sleep barely came. Instead, he sat by his fireplace holding one of the apples in his hand. It was bruised on one side. Small, imperfect, but it reminded him of something he hadn't tasted in years. Simplicity, the kind you couldn't buy back. He rolled the apple between his palms, slowly, as the flames cracked behind him. 10 years ago, he had walked out of that warehouse with nothing but smoke in his lungs and guilt on his shoulders. The fire had started in the northeast quadrant. Faulty wires, no sprinklers. 1 minute he was reviewing delivery logs and the next, chaos. There were screams, sirens, darkness. He remembered a voice calling out, dragging him from under a collapsed shelf, and then, nothing. He never found out who saved him. No one ever came forward. Until now, he wondered, could it have been her? Could those boys be hers? Could they be his? Daniel's thoughts swirled like ash in the wind. The next morning, he went back, the same corner, the same cracked sidewalk, the chill even sharper than before. But the boys weren't there. Just a scuffed piece of cardboard on the ground, the same hand-drawn sign that read, "Fresh apples, $1." Daniel picked it up gently, like it might break apart in his hands. The edges were curled, the ink running slightly from the dew. He stood there for a long moment, unsure of what he was hoping for. Then, from behind him, a voice called out, "You came back!" Daniel turned. It was Evan, alone this time. His backpack looked heavier than it should have. His shoelaces were untied, but his gaze was steady. Daniel smiled softly. "I did." Evan approached, stopping a few feet away. "We only sell on weekends," he said, almost apologetically. "School's during the week." "Of course," Daniel nodded. "That makes sense." Evan eyed him. "You okay?" Daniel chuckled. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing." The boy shrugged. "We're fine. We help Mom when she's tired. And we don't take money from people who look like they feel sorry for us." Daniel crouched slightly so they were eye level. "I don't feel sorry for you, Evan. I was surprised. That badge. It used to belong to me." Evan looked down, rubbing his arm. "Yeah, we kinda figured. You look like the photo, just older." Daniel smiled, his heart clenching. "Where did your mom get it?" Evan paused. "She used to work at the warehouse, a long time ago. Said it was the only job that gave her overtime without asking questions. Said it saved our lives for a little while." Daniel's voice caught. "What's her name?" The boy hesitated. "Why do you care?" Daniel took a breath. "Because I think I remember her, and I think she might remember me." Evan studied him, then finally said, "Her name's Marissa, Marissa Cole." Daniel's heart skipped. That name. He hadn't heard it in 10 years. She had been quiet, reliable, worked night shifts, always kept a photo of 2 tiny babies in her locker. He remembered her bringing leftover soup for the security guards, soft-spoken, kind. And after the fire, gone. No one could reach her. She never came to the survivor meetings. Never claimed her back pay, HR had tried to find her, so had he, secretly, but no luck. Until now. Evan took a step back. If you're gonna hurt her, don't. She works hard. She doesn't need more trouble. Daniel's voice trembled. I don't want to hurt her, Evan. I want to understand what happened. I think I owe her more than I ever realized. Evan squinted. What's that supposed to mean? Daniel straightened slowly. It means I might have walked away from something I never should have forgotten. Just then, Eli's voice called from across the street. Evan! Come on! Evan looked back. I gotta go. Daniel nodded. Okay. But before Evan turned, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled something out. A tiny piece of laminated paper, the badge. He handed it to Daniel. Mom said to throw it out. I didn't. Figured maybe it still meant something. Daniel took it carefully. It does, he said quietly. Evan gave a small nod, then ran off. Daniel stood there, the badge in his hand, heart heavier than it had been in years. Because in that moment, he wasn't just a man trying to remember. He was a man starting to hope. Daniel held the badge in his hands like it was made of glass. The faded laminate. The photo from a decade ago. His younger face frozen in time. His name still legible beneath the burn marks. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed who he was back then. Before the fire. Before the silence. Before the guilt pushed him into a fortress of glass and marble he called his office. Now, standing in his kitchen with morning light filtering through the blinds, Daniel finally had a name. Marissa Cole. And 2 boys. Evan and Eli. Twins. The realization hit like a rising tide. No longer just a strange coincidence. Something deeper was unfolding. Something that refused to stay buried. By noon, he was parked outside a weathered 2-story apartment building on the east side of Portland. He recognized the address from a background trace he'd requested quietly that morning. It didn't sit right with him to look her up, but something inside him needed to know if the woman who saved his life had also raised 2 boys who shared his eyes. The building looked tired. The steps creaked beneath his shoes. The door had a sticky note taped beside the number. Out until 4. Don't let the landlord in. Daniel hesitated, then sat on the steps and waited. Hours passed. Kids rode by on bikes. A man argued with someone over speakerphone in the parking lot. The wind picked up, cool and restless. Then he saw her. She turned the corner with a cloth tote on one arm and a paper bag in the other. Her hair was pulled back in a loose bun, streaked with silver now, but her posture, the way she moved, he remembered that. Marissa froze when she saw him. The bag slipped slightly in her grip. Daniel? He stood gently. Hi, Marissa. She stared at him, eyes wide, mouth parting but no words coming. He noticed the way her shoulders tightened, defensive, wary. He lifted his hands, palms out. I'm not here to cause trouble, I swear. Her voice was rougher than he remembered, tired. What are you doing here? He swallowed, then held out the badge. Evan gave this back to me. I think we have a lot to talk about. Her eyes dropped to the badge, and her whole expression changed. Her chest rose, slowly, painfully, like breathing hurt now. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I know, he said quietly, but I need to be. Marissa stepped past him and unlocked the door. Come in, but don't stay long. Inside, the apartment was small, neat but worn. 2 school backpacks rested by the door. A pot simmered gently on the stove. She placed the groceries down, exhaled slowly, then turned to face him. I didn't know how to find you after the fire. You disappeared. They said you left the company. No forwarding address, no media, just gone. I couldn't face it, Daniel admitted honestly. The guilt, the people we lost. I didn't deserve to start over. Marissa crossed her arms. And now, you think you do? I don't know, he said truthfully. I just know your sons. They look like me. Her lips parted, then shut. I'm not here to accuse you. I'm not even sure what I want yet, Daniel added, voice trembling. But I saw Evan and Eli, and I looked into their eyes. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Silence hung between them. Then she finally said it. You left something behind that night, more than just your badge. Daniel's throat tightened. They're mine? She nodded once, slowly. He closed his eyes, let it sink in. Why didn't you tell me? I was 23, Marissa said, voice thick. You were the CEO's golden boy. I was an overnight shift nobody with burns on her arms and nothing to offer except twin boys and a broken heart. I thought, maybe it was better this way. Daniel stepped closer, cautiously. But you still wore the necklace I saw in your locker. The one with the little apple charm. You still had that. Marissa blinked, caught off guard. You remember that? I remember everything now, he said softly. She wiped at her eyes. They're good boys, smart, kind. They sell apples to help me cover rent. They don't need you turning their lives upside down. I'm not here to take anything, he said gently, but I'd like to know them, if that's okay. She studied him. You don't get to just walk in and be a father. I know, but maybe I can start by being someone they can count on. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't tell him to leave either, and for now, that was enough. The apartment had settled into a soft quiet. Daniel sat at the small kitchen table while Marissa moved quietly around the kitchen, her motions practiced, economical. She poured 2 mugs of tea without asking and slid one toward him without a word. Steam curled between them. Are they home yet? He asked carefully, eyes flicking to the 2 backpacks by the door. Not for another half hour. They help at the community garden on Thursdays, she replied, sitting down across from him. Her fingers wrapped around the chipped ceramic, but she didn't drink. Daniel hesitated, then said, I still remember the day of the explosion, the fire, the screaming. I remember trying to crawl, and then someone dragging me through the smoke. Marissa's voice was low. You couldn't even breathe. Your suit jacket had melted to your arm. I had to rip it off. He winced. They said I passed out before we got outside. You did. I thought you were gone. I was 19, Daniel. Just finished EMT training. That was my 3rd night on the job. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Daniel looked down. I'm sorry I never said thank you. Marissa shook her head slowly. I didn't expect you to. I didn't even expect you to remember me. I did, he said softly. I just buried everything, even the good parts. They sat in silence for a beat. Then Marissa took a breath. Do you want to know about them? Evan and Eli? Daniel nodded, almost too quickly. She smiled faintly, a little wistfully. Evan's the older one, by 2 minutes. He's the quiet thinker. Loves books, always asking questions about how things work. He broke my toaster once trying to rewire it into a timer for his school project. Daniel smiled. Sounds like he's got an engineer's brain. And Eli, she continued, her voice warming, Eli's the talker. He charms everyone, loves music, makes up songs for everything, even brushing his teeth. Daniel chuckled. That sounds exhausting. Marissa laughed softly. You have no idea. He looked at her carefully. They don't know who I am, do they? Her smile faded. No, I told them their father was someone I knew a long time ago, that he was kind, that he saved me once. Daniel's throat tightened. I don't deserve that kind of credit. You saved me too, she said, surprising him. You gave me 2 reasons to keep going. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought my life was over, but they became my everything." He took a deep breath. "I don't want to mess that up, but I can't walk away now either. I want to be part of their lives, even if just as a friend, or a mentor, or a something." She looked at him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "I won't promise anything, but I won't shut the door either." The sound of the front doorknob jiggling cut through the air. "Mom!" a voice called. "It's just us." Daniel stood instinctively, nervous energy surging through him. Two boys stepped in. One held a small plastic crate of vegetables. The other kicked off his shoes with practiced laziness. "Hey guys," Marissa said, standing as well. "We have a guest." The boys turned, and Daniel felt his breath catch. The resemblance was undeniable. Evan had his eyes. Eli had his grin. "Hi," Daniel said, offering a gentle smile. "My name's Daniel. I think I met you earlier this week." Evan squinted. "You're the guy from the market. You dropped your wallet. And your badge," Eli added. "You left it in the apple bin." Daniel nodded. "That's right. I wanted to say thank you again. That badge meant a lot to me." The boys exchanged a glance. Then Eli stepped forward, his curiosity obvious. "Are you a teacher or something?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Not exactly. I used to work at a place called Westport Logistics, a long time ago." Evan's eyes widened. "That's the company Mom used to work at." Daniel met Marissa's eyes briefly. "Yeah, that's how we knew each other." The boys didn't press further, and for that, Daniel silently thanked them. "Would you two mind if I came by again sometime?" he asked. "Maybe helped with your school projects, or brought some books?" Eli shrugged. "Sure, as long as you don't give us homework." Marissa laughed behind them, and Daniel smiled with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. That night, as he walked back to his car under a dusky sky, Daniel didn't feel like a millionaire, or a CEO, or even a man with something to prove. He felt like a man taking his very first steps toward something he never thought he'd get back. Family. Daniel arrived at the small rental again the following Saturday afternoon, hands full of pizza boxes and a book tucked under his arm. He wasn't sure what had compelled him to come back so soon, but his heart had tugged relentlessly all week. There were still things he didn't know, still questions he hadn't dared to ask. This time, when Marissa opened the door, her face relaxed into a quiet smile. "You brought pizza?" she asked, tilting her head. Daniel gave a sheepish grin. "Bribery. It's still effective with kids, right?" "You're not wrong," she said warmly, stepping aside. "They're in the living room." The house smelled like cinnamon and something slightly burnt. A small, square living room branched off from the kitchen filled with mismatched furniture. A single armchair stood near the window, its fabric worn but clean. The couch sagged in the middle. Eli popped up from behind the couch cushions. "You came back." "I did," Daniel replied, setting the boxes down on the coffee table. "And I brought dessert pizza, too. Don't tell your dentist." Evan looked up from a Lego set on the floor, a small smile flickering across his face. The boys tore into the food like wolves, and Daniel took the floor beside Evan, watching him build a miniature truck with practiced focus. "That's impressive," Daniel said softly. "Thanks," Evan murmured. "I like making stuff that works. You ever think about engineering?" Evan nodded slowly. "Sometimes, but Mom says college costs a lot." Daniel's heart clenched. He cleared his throat and held up the book he'd brought. "I thought maybe we could read this later. How Things Work, a Visual Guide. I read it when I was your age." Evan's eyes lit up. Marissa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the interaction. Her gaze softened as Eli climbed into her lap with a greasy smile and pepperoni sauce on his cheek. Later, when the boys went outside to ride their battered scooters down the driveway, Daniel and Marissa sat on the porch steps. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the street. "They like you," she said quietly. Daniel looked down at his hands. I like them too. I didn't expect to, not this fast, but they're good kids. They are. A pause. I talked to my lawyer, Daniel said gently. Marissa stiffened. Just to ask what my options were, not to take them from you, he clarified quickly. I would never do that. I want to be part of their lives, in a real way, legally. Marissa's shoulders dropped a little. It's complicated. I know. They already lost a lot, she whispered. Their school friends, their old neighborhood. When my hours were cut, we had to move. Again. I can help, he offered sincerely. Not just with money. I want to help you breathe again. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back. I don't want pity. It's not pity, Daniel said firmly. It's responsibility. I lost 10 years I didn't even know I had. That's on me. But I can be here now. A long silence stretched between them. Then Marissa spoke, her voice barely audible. Eli told me he wished you were his uncle, because uncles come to dinner, but don't take you away. Daniel swallowed hard. Then I'll start with dinner, and work my way up to whatever they'll let me be. Inside the house, a knock at the door made them both turn. Marissa frowned. We're not expecting anyone. She stood and opened the door. A man stood there. Suit, tie, briefcase, eyes sharp and cold. Marissa Langford? He asked. You've been served. He handed her a yellow envelope and walked away before she could respond. She opened it slowly. Daniel watched her face go pale. What is it? He asked. My landlord, she said hollowly. He's filing for eviction. Daniel stood, heart pounding. Why? She shook her head. Said I violated the lease by having someone living here without permission. He saw you leaving last night. Thought I moved in a man. Daniel cursed under his breath. That's ridiculous. She laughed bitterly. Doesn't matter. He owns the place. Daniel looked at her. At the fear flickering behind her brave expression, at the way her hand curled protectively over the boys' scooter helmets still resting on the floor. You're not going through this alone, he said quietly. She looked up at him, eyes shining. I mean it, Daniel whispered. You saved my life once. Let me help save yours. And for the first time in a very long time, Marissa didn't argue. Daniel returned the next day. He didn't call ahead. He didn't want to give Marissa time to say no. He just showed up with grocery bags in both arms, heart pounding like a drum. Marissa opened the door, startled. I brought dinner, he said breathlessly, lifting the bags. I figured maybe the boys could help me cook? She stared at him for a moment, torn between confusion and fatigue, then slowly stepped aside. I'm too tired to argue, she said with a small, tired smile. The kitchen was narrow. A single window above the sink let in the fading afternoon light. The counters were chipped but clean. Daniel rolled up his sleeves, pulled ingredients out like he belonged there. Pasta, chicken, cream, parmesan, basil. Eli bounced in first. Are you making Alfredo? I am, Daniel said proudly. My mother's recipe. Or, close enough. Evan wandered in behind, curious. Do we get to help? Absolutely, Daniel said, handing Evan a small cutting board. You're in charge of parsley, finely chopped. You too, Eli. You get to stir the sauce, but only in one direction. That's the rule. Why? Eli asked. Because my mom said so, Daniel said, grinning. And she never explained it, so now it's sacred. Marissa leaned against the doorway. She watched her sons laugh. She watched Daniel move around the kitchen with a kind of reverent chaos. He dropped a spoon, burned the garlic, nearly forgot to boil the pasta. But the boys didn't care. They were too busy laughing at how he whisked like a man fighting off bees. Dinner was ready just as the sun dipped below the horizon. They sat on the floor round the coffee table because there weren't enough chairs, and passed plates and forks like it was Thanksgiving. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," Eli declared, mouth full. "It's not bad," Evan agreed. "Kinda salty." Daniel gasped. "Blasphemy." Marissa chuckled softly. "It's delicious. Thank you." Daniel looked at her for a moment. Then he said, more serious now, "You shouldn't have to fight this alone. Not the eviction, not the bills, not raising them." "I've been doing it for a long time," she said quietly. "I'm used to it." "That doesn't mean you should keep doing it alone." She didn't answer right away. She just looked down at her plate. "I want to help," Daniel said gently. "Not to take over, not to fix you, just to be here, with them, with you." She looked at him, eyes heavy. "You say that now, but when the media finds out, when your world gets loud again, what happens then?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a simple manila folder. "This is a temporary guardianship form," he said softly. "It gives me legal standing to help pay for the house, medical bills, school stuff. Nothing changes custody. But it protects you if something happens to me, and it protects them." She stared at it. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight," he added quickly, "but I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going quiet." The room fell silent. Then Eli broke it. "Can we have this every Friday?" Daniel laughed. "Deal." After dinner, Evan asked him to read a book. Daniel sat between the boys on the couch, the pages open across their laps. Marissa stayed in the kitchen, washing dishes, listening to the rhythm of Daniel's voice. He read slowly, warmly, like it mattered. When the boys fell asleep, Daniel helped her fold a load of laundry. The rhythm of it felt strangely familiar, intimate. "I think I was angry," she admitted suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. "At first, when I saw your face again, when I realized who you were. I understand. I wasn't angry that you left," she continued. "I was angry that you didn't know, that nobody told you, that the system just swallowed the truth." Daniel nodded slowly. "I've spent 10 years making deliveries across the globe, shipping products I'll never see opened. But this is the first time I've delivered anything that truly matters." Marissa blinked, emotion catching in her throat. He looked down. "You didn't get to choose this, and neither did I, but maybe, just maybe, we get to choose what comes next." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "Good night, Daniel." He smiled. "Good night, Marissa." When he left that night, the stars were brighter than usual, and for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like he was walking away from something. He felt like he was walking toward it. By Monday morning, the quiet calm of Daniel's world had been shattered. It started with a knock. Not at the front door, but through his phone. An urgent alert from a media outlet, then another, then 20 more, all blaring one headline. "Reclusive CEO Daniel Whitmore, caught in paternity scandal, uses orphans to repair image?" The article showed a blurry photo of Daniel handing the boys apples at the market, another of them leaving the apartment building together, and somehow, impossibly, the oldest image of all, Daniel's childhood ID badge, grainy and aged, now clipped to Evan's shirt. Marissa's phone lit up with messages, some from old co-workers, others from landlords, one from her boss asking to speak urgently. Daniel drove straight to her apartment, heart racing. When she opened the door, he saw it immediately, the fear behind her brave expression. "They've called my employer," she said flatly. "Said I might be involved in a media scheme." Daniel stepped inside. "This isn't a scheme. We didn't ask for this. They think I'm trying to blackmail you," she added, voice shaking, "that I'm parading the boys around for sympathy. I could lose my job, Daniel. I could lose them." "No," he said firmly. "They won't." But the damage had already begun. A legal notice arrived the next day. The landlord was moving forward with eviction, citing unauthorized occupancy and disruptive press attention. The same afternoon, a child welfare officer visited the school, questioning Evan and Eli about where they slept, what they ate, and whether they trusted the man with them. Marissa broke down that night. Daniel found her sitting on the edge of her bed, hands trembling, tears streaking down her face. "I tried so hard," she whispered. "I kept them safe. I worked double shifts. I never asked for help, and now they're saying I'm unfit because you came back." Daniel knelt in front of her. His voice was low, calm, unwavering. "Then we fight back, together." She looked at him through blurry eyes. "With what? Lawyers cost more than my rent, and courts don't care about history. They care about proof." Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a file, this one thicker than the last. Inside were documents, pay stubs showing Marissa's consistent employment, doctor's notes about her heart condition, photos of the twins' school projects, their drawings, and even their handmade chore board with her name at the top. He added one final item, a letter. "From your doctor," he explained, "saying you've managed a chronic condition while raising two healthy, emotionally intelligent children, alone." She stared at it, stunned. "And this," he said, pulling out another envelope, "is from me, a formal affidavit stating that I've confirmed my biological relationship to Evan and Eli, that I've seen their home, and that I believe, without hesitation, that you are a capable, loving mother." Marissa pressed her hand to her mouth. He hesitated, then said softly, "I want to stand beside you in court, as their father, not just the man who gave them his last name, but the one who chooses to fight for them." The hearing was set for Friday. It wasn't a grand courtroom, just a modest room with faded carpeting and tired benches. But to Daniel, it might as well have been the Senate floor. Reporters hovered outside the building. Cameras flashed as they entered, but Daniel held Eli's hand. Marissa held Evan's, and they walked through those doors like a family. The opposing lawyer tried to paint a picture, a billionaire using publicity to manufacture a redemption arc, a mother who allowed media exposure to distract from her failing finances. But Marissa sat tall, and when she spoke, her voice didn't shake. "I didn't reach out to Daniel," she said. "I didn't want charity. I wanted peace. But my sons, they wanted answers, and now they want their father." The judge turned to Evan and Eli. "Do you understand why we're here?" he asked gently. Eli nodded. "It's about where we live, right?" "Yes. And about who's responsible for you." Evan spoke then. "She is. Our mom. She always has been. But we want him too." The judge paused, tapping his pen thoughtfully, then said, "I will review both guardianship and media exposure records. But for now, there will be no eviction, no job termination, and no removal of custody." Marissa covered her face, shoulders shaking with relief. Daniel reached for her hand, this time without hesitation. The judge looked at him. "Mr. Whitmore, I suggest you consider a formal petition. These boys deserve the security of having both parents legally committed." Daniel nodded solemnly. "I already have the papers. I'll file them tomorrow." As they exited the courthouse, the sun broke through the clouds. For the first time, Daniel didn't feel like he was fighting against headlines. He felt like he was writing a new one. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the air, mingling with the soft sound of laughter echoing from the kitchen. Daniel stood in the doorway, leaning slightly on the frame, watching the scene unfold with quiet awe. Marissa was teaching Evan and Eli how to make French toast, her sleeves rolled up and hair pulled back in a messy bun. Eli was carefully cracking eggs while Evan dumped in too much cinnamon, grinning like he'd just discovered a secret. "Too much?" Evan asked playfully. "Only if we're feeding the entire neighborhood," Marissa teased. Daniel chuckled under his breath. He hadn't laughed like this in years. Not the polite kind at board meetings, but the kind that made your chest feel lighter. "Morning," he said, stepping into the kitchen. Eli turned, excitedly holding up a fork. "We're cooking breakfast, Dad." The word made Daniel freeze for just a moment. It still felt new, fragile, like glass. But when Evan echoed it, casually saying, "Hey, Dad, can we add strawberries too?" something settled in him, something real. "You can add whatever you want," Daniel said, ruffling Evan's hair gently. "It smells amazing." After breakfast, they gathered on the couch, their plates resting on napkins. The TV was on low, playing an old animated movie, but no one was really watching. Daniel sat between the boys, Marissa across from them in the armchair. There was something sacred about the moment. Ordinary, yet extraordinary. Marissa finally broke the silence. "They've been sleeping better." Daniel nodded. "They smile more, too." "And you?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "I feel like I found something I didn't know I lost." She smiled gently, then stood and retrieved a worn envelope from her purse. She walked over and placed it in his hands. "What's this?" he asked. "I found it last night. It's from Nora, from years ago. She wrote it before she passed. I never sent it. I didn't know where you were." Daniel opened the envelope carefully. The letter inside was written in looping script. "Dear Daniel, if you're reading this, then fate has a strange way of circling back. I never told you, but I carried something from that day in the factory. Not just your badge, but a spark, a life. Evan and Eli are yours. I never asked for help. I just wanted them to know the kind of man you were. If they find you one day, be kind. And if you can, love them. Nora." His throat tightened. The room blurred at the edges. "I had no idea," he whispered. Marissa nodded. She didn't want pity or complications, just peace. Daniel stared at the words, running his thumb over the ink. "I failed her," he murmured. Marissa stepped closer. "No, you didn't know, but you know now." That night, he tucked the boys in himself. He read 2 chapters from their favorite book, using different voices for each character. Evan giggled at his silly impressions. Eli fell asleep with his head against Daniel's arm. Marissa stood in the hallway, watching quietly. When Daniel closed the door behind him, she said, "They've never had this before. Not like this." He glanced back at the closed door. "Neither have I." She hesitated, then asked, "Are you scared?" Daniel nodded. "Terrified. Every second. But also, I feel alive again." She stepped closer. Her voice trembled. "I don't want to lose them. I don't want to lose this." "You won't," he said gently. "Not while I'm breathing." For the first time, she leaned into him. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was warm, trusting, a bridge between the past and whatever future they might build in. The days that followed, the apartment changed. Not physically, but in spirit. Evan started drawing again, filling up pages with rocket ships and superheroes, and in one sketch, a man in a suit holding hands with 2 boys. Eli began asking about Daniel's job. His eyes lit up when Daniel described how the logistics world worked, how a single barcode could send a package around the globe. And Daniel? He started arriving home early. He canceled 2 investor meetings just to watch the boys play in the park. He even burned dinner once trying to cook spaghetti without reading the instructions. The twins laughed so hard they cried. One evening, while they played a board game, Evan looked up and said, "This place feels like home now." Marissa smiled. "That's because we're building it together." Daniel looked around at the apartment. It was still modest, still small. But he had never felt richer. The quiet didn't last. It began with a sharp knock at the apartment door just after dusk. Daniel looked up from the kitchen table where he and the boys were working on a puzzle. Marissa, seated nearby with a cup of tea, instantly tensed. Daniel opened the door cautiously. A man in a crisp navy suit stood there, flanked by a second figure holding a camera. "Mr. Whitmore?" the man asked, voice clipped and cold. Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, can I help you?" The man held out a sleek business card. "Walter Keyes. I represent Mr. Lewis Graham, the current owner of this building. I'm here to notify you of an official eviction proceeding, effective in 3 days." Marissa stood up behind him, voice shaking. "What? That can't be right. We've paid every month." Keyes didn't flinch. "There was a clause. Tenant must not engage in disruptive activity or invite press attention that might affect other residents' comfort. Given the media coverage of Mr. Whitmore's recent personal affairs, our client has decided to enforce it." Daniel's jaw clenched. "So, you're evicting them for being related to me?" "No, sir. We're evicting them for violating lease terms. The press has already staked out the building twice." Daniel took a step forward. "Let me be perfectly clear. You're punishing this woman and her children for something entirely out of their control. That's not just unethical, it's cowardly." The camera clicked. Keyes gave a thin smile. "We'll see you in court, if necessary." He turned and walked away. Daniel shut the door, hard. Eli looked up, frightened. "Are we in trouble?" Daniel crouched beside him, pulling both boys close. No, you're not. I promise." Marissa sat down, her hands trembling around the cup. "This is my fault. I should have kept things quiet." Daniel shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of you did." He picked up his phone, dialing someone fast. "Jared? Yeah. I need a lawyer. Now." The next morning, headlines lit up every corner of the internet. Millionaire CEO accused of using twins for sympathy. Is this a PR move or a real family reunion? From a power broker to pity project. Daniel read the articles with growing disgust. Most were filled with speculation, half-truths, and phrases like emotional manipulation and image laundering. He turned off the screen and looked out the window. The sky was gray. By mid-afternoon, a local news crew showed up outside the building. Marissa pulled the blinds shut. Daniel paced. "I'm ending this. I'm not going to let anyone twist the truth." He stepped outside and approached the reporters calmly. One thrust a microphone forward. "Mr. Whitmore, what do you say to the people claiming this is all a PR stunt?" Daniel's voice was steady, deliberate. "I say they've clearly never held a child while he cried in his sleep. They've never heard their son call them Dad for the first time and felt the world shift under their feet." "But why now? Why after all these years?" Another reporter pushed. He nodded. "Because I didn't know, and now that I do, I'm not turning away. No headline will change that." He turned and walked back inside, shutting the door behind him. Evan stood at the top of the stairs, watching. "Did they believe you?" the boy asked. Daniel looked up at him, heart breaking. "I don't know, buddy, but I believe in us." That evening, the lawyer arrived. Her name was Denise Carter, sharp-eyed and compassionate. She reviewed the eviction notice and the press coverage, then glanced at Daniel. "We can challenge this, but it'll be public. Messy. Are you ready for that?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yes, do whatever it takes." She looked at Marissa. "We'll need a statement. Maybe even a court appearance." Marissa nodded softly. "I'll do it. For them." Denise gave a reassuring smile. "Then let's get started." Later that night, the apartment was quiet again. Eli was already asleep, curled up with a blanket. Evan was fighting to stay awake on the couch. Daniel carried him gently to bed. As he tucked him in, Evan mumbled drowsily, "Will they take us away, Dad?" Daniel knelt beside him, his voice raw. No one's taking you. Ever. You're mine now, and I'm yours. Evan blinked up at him. Promise? Daniel nodded. Cross my heart. The boy finally closed his eyes. Peaceful, Daniel sat there long after, watching him sleep. His hands rested on the edge of the bed, as if afraid to let go. Tomorrow, the fight would continue. But tonight, this small room, filled with the soft breath of children and the distant hum of a city that didn't know the whole story, was the only place that mattered. 3 days later, the courthouse buzzed with tension. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Daniel adjusted his blazer, his hands trembling slightly. He wasn't nervous about the legal process. He was nervous for them, for Evan, for Eli, for Marissa. Denise, their attorney, walked up beside him. They're already inside, she said gently. It's going to be okay. Daniel nodded, but a part of him didn't believe it. Across the hall, the door creaked open. Marissa stepped out. She wore a simple blue dress. Her cheeks were pale, but her eyes, they held something firm. Not anger, not fear, but conviction. I'm ready, she whispered. They entered together. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Judge Halperin, scanned the room from behind thick glasses. This is a hearing regarding the contested eviction of tenants residing at 18 Eastman Lane, she began. Let's proceed. The landlord's representative spoke first, droning on about lease violations, unwanted media attention, and disruptive activity. Daniel barely listened. What mattered came next. Denise stood. Her voice rang out clearly. Your Honor, this is not a case about contracts or clauses. This is a case about timing and intention. Ms. Marissa Cole has lived in that unit for 4 years without incident. It was only after Mr. Whitmore's involvement, after the press caught wind of their connection, that the eviction was filed. Judge Halperin raised a brow. Is that true, Mr. Keyes? The landlord's lawyer squirmed. The lease terms were violated. That's all I can say. The judge scribbled a note, then looked up. Ms. Cole, you may speak. Marissa stood slowly. She looked around the courtroom, at the faces watching her, some curious, some skeptical. Then she took a breath, steady and deep. 10 years ago, I worked at Whitmore Freight. I was just a temp, filing invoices, taking calls, but the night of the explosion, I was on duty, and I was the one who got Daniel out. Gasps echoed quietly from the gallery. She continued, I didn't know I was pregnant. Not until weeks later, and by then, Daniel had disappeared. The company said he was recovering overseas. No contact, no closure. Daniel sat frozen. I raised my boys alone. I worked shifts at the diner. I cleaned offices. I did my best. And I never asked for a thing, until the day he found us again. Not because of guilt, not for show, but because of a boy selling apples with an old ID badge I kept as a keepsake. She turned, looked directly at Daniel, and then at the judge. My sons call him Dad now. Not because he told them to, but because he earned it. With pancakes, with story time, with sitting beside them during nightmares. He is their father in every way that counts. A pause. Then, quietly, and, Your Honor, if this courtroom tells us we can't stay, if we're forced to move because the world found out we're family, then what hope is there for anyone trying to rebuild? Silence settled like snow. Judge Halperin nodded slowly. Thank you, Miss Cole. She tapped her pen twice against the wood. This court will reconvene tomorrow with a ruling. In the meantime, the eviction is on hold. Everyone stood as the judge exited. Marissa sat down shakily. Daniel knelt beside her, gently taking her hand. You were incredible, he said softly. I was terrified, she whispered. That's what made it brave. That evening, back at the apartment, the boys were curled up on the couch watching cartoons when Marissa returned. Evan jumped up. "Did we win?" Marissa smiled and kissed his forehead. "Not yet, but we're still fighting." Daniel tucked a blanket around Eli, who was nearly asleep. Marissa sat beside him, her voice tired but hopeful. "You know, for years, I wished you'd come back. Not because I needed rescuing, but because I knew, deep down, you would have been a good dad." Daniel looked at her, eyes soft. "I'm sorry for everything I missed." She reached over, squeezing his hand. "Then don't miss anything else." Outside, the rain had started again, but inside the small apartment, there was warmth, the kind that no lawsuit or article could take away. Tomorrow, they'd find out if they could stay. But tonight, they were already home. The next morning, Portland was still gray from the storm, but the sky had stopped crying. Daniel sat at the kitchen table in Marissa's apartment, a half-drunk cup of coffee cooling in his hands. Across from him, Evan and Eli were hunched over their sketchbooks, their pencils dancing quietly across the pages. Even in stillness, they were full of life. He watched them, one tongue slightly sticking out in focus, the other softly humming, his sons. Sons. The word hadn't felt real until now. Marissa moved gently around the kitchen, packing snacks, checking her phone. Her movements were calm, but Daniel could see the tension behind her eyes. They were waiting for a call, the judge's ruling. It could come at any moment. "I keep checking like it'll come faster," she said softly, slipping her phone back into her pocket. Daniel smiled, but it faded just as quickly. "You did everything right yesterday. Whatever happens, the judge saw that." Marissa looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "And if it doesn't matter?" He paused, then spoke with quiet certainty. "Then we find another way, together." The doorbell rang. For a second, no one moved. Then Marissa stepped toward it, hesitating just a moment before opening it. A courier stood on the other side, holding an envelope. "For Miss Cole," he said, then left without another word. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Daniel stood beside her, close enough to feel her breath catch as she read the letter once, then again. She looked up. Tears glistened in her eyes. "We won." Daniel exhaled deeply, shoulders sagging in visible relief. "They ruled in our favor?" he asked. Marissa nodded. "The eviction's canceled, and the court recognized the situation as retaliatory. They even issued a warning to the landlord." The boys looked up from the table, sensing the shift in the room. "What's going on?" Evan asked. Marissa knelt in front of them, pulling them into her arms. "We're staying," she said. "This is still our home." Eli blinked. "For real?" Daniel smiled through a tightening throat. "For real." That night, they made spaghetti and garlic bread, not because it was fancy, but because it was everyone's favorite. They ate on the couch, knees touching, laughter echoing off the worn walls like music. After dinner, the boys dragged Daniel into their shared room. "Close your eyes," Evan said, excitement buzzing in his voice. "No peeking," Eli added. Daniel laughed. All right. He closed his eyes, heard a few scuffles, some whispered counting. "Okay, open them." In front of him was a hand-drawn poster taped above the bunk beds. Crayon letters spelled out, "Welcome home." Daniel stared at it, his throat tightening. Underneath the words were two cartoon versions of Evan and Eli, with a taller, smiling man between them. He crouched down to their level. "You guys made this?" Eli nodded. "We started it before court. We just hoped." Daniel pulled them close. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." That night, as the boys slept soundly, Daniel sat at the kitchen table again. This time with Marissa, A quiet candle flickered between them, casting soft shadows on their tired faces. "I've been thinking," he said gently. She looked at him with curiosity. "I want to do more than visit, more than just help." She stayed silent, listening. "I want a petition for joint custody, not to take them away, but to build something real, legal, lasting." Marissa's eyes didn't fill with fear, just thought. "You'd really want that?" Daniel reached for her hand. "I lost 10 years, Marissa. I can't get them back, but I can fight for the rest." She blinked away sudden tears. "Then let's fight together." From the boys' room, a soft snore floated into the living room. Daniel chuckled. "That one's Evan. He snores when he's had too much garlic bread." Marissa laughed, leaning back. "Then Eli's the one who kicks." They sat in that warmth. A man who once ran from family, and a woman who once raised it alone, now choosing something together. And, for the first time in years, Daniel didn't feel like a visitor in his own life. He felt home. The days that followed moved slowly, tenderly. Portland's gray skies gradually gave way to gentle sun, and Daniel found himself settling into a rhythm he never expected. School drop-offs, weekend pancake breakfasts, long walks through the park holding 2 small hands in his. He had stepped away from the towering walls of Whitmore logistics. The board had protested, of course, but Daniel had looked them in the eyes and simply said, "I built this company. I'll build a new life now," and he meant every word. His townhouse no longer echoed with silence. Now it buzzed with crayons, laughter, and the occasional crash of toy trucks against kitchen cabinets. There were still moments of doubt, of course. Parenting didn't come with a handbook, but every time he tucked the boys into bed, their arms looped tightly around his, he knew he was right where he belonged. On a bright Saturday morning, Marissa arrived with a small cardboard box in her hands. "I found this tucked in the back of the closet," she said. "Thought you might want it." Daniel opened it slowly. Inside was the faded work jacket he'd worn the day of the explosion, charred at the sleeves, the logo barely visible on the chest. Tucked inside the pocket was a note. He unfolded it, his hands trembling slightly. "Daniel, if anything happens to me, take care of our boys. They'll have your eyes, your spirit, your fight. I believe in you, even when you don't. M." He closed his eyes. For 10 years, that note had waited. So had he. That night, Daniel invited everyone to the new house for dinner. Not a mansion, not some luxury estate, just a quiet home with space for bunk beds, a swing set, and a kitchen big enough for everyone to dance in while the spaghetti boiled. Marissa brought a fruit salad. The boys brought their sketchbooks and wide grins. As they all sat around the table, Daniel raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To the people who made me whole again," he said. Eli raised his juice box. "To second chances." They clinked. After dinner, the boys disappeared into their room and came back holding something behind their backs. "Close your eyes, Dad," Evan said. Daniel laughed. "Again?" "Come on," Eli grinned. "No peeking." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the boys held out a framed drawing, crayon, and marker. The 3 of them standing in front of a small house with a heart over the roof. Above the scene, in uneven, colorful letters, were the words, "We found you." Daniel didn't speak. Couldn't. He knelt down, pulled them both into his arms, and whispered, "I didn't know I was lost, until you brought me back." Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep and Marissa had headed home, Daniel stood in the hallway, looking at the new photo wall. Most of the frames were still empty, waiting. But the one in the center was full. A snapshot from a few weeks ago, Evan and Eli, wide smiles, Daniel in the middle, arms around them, looking not like a CEO, not like a businessman, but like a father. Below the frame was a plaque the boys had picked out. It read, "Family, built from love, not luck." Daniel reached up and touched it gently, then turned toward the bedroom, the sounds of quiet breathing guiding him down the hall. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. The city lights blinked in the distance. But inside, in this little home, everything was still, everything was right. And for the first time in a decade, Daniel Whitmore was no longer alone. He was found. He was loved. He was home.